I just want to see if anybody can hear me. This is only a test. Test. Anybody? Anybody hear me? Please let me know if anybody comes in. Just say, yes, I can hear, or no, I can't. Hi, Mary, can you hear me? Isabel, you can hear me? You can hear me? Oh, good. I wonder what happened yesterday. Remember, you guys couldn't hear me. Well, at the beginning. Hi, Linda. Okay. Hi, Nicole. Did you see the video I made thanking you for the? I love this, Nicole. I keep looking at it, and I keep opening it. I really like it. It's adorable. I kept thinking about this too. I was thinking, I wonder why she won't let me auction. Why won't she put that in the auction or just let me buy it from her? I was thinking, wow, Oh, thank you, Nicole. And you are so sweet for sending it. I'm going to see if I can change this title because I was going to read another one of those stories. Okay. Let me read one more for a few minutes. Haunted Lore, I think it's called. Let me change this. Come listen for a few. Save. Changes saved. Can you tell if that title changed at all? Do you have a bad storm coming? Hi, Chris Ree. Hi, Margot. Okay, let me go get the book. Hold on, guys. Oh, how do you guys like this so far? I still have to put the coating on here. Isn't it cute? This is the one I had my hand in. You like it, Mary? Yeah, I think it's really pretty. Made from some Carolyn's napkins. I'm going to take, get the edges, rub the edges off, and that way you can use the lid if you want. Let me grab that book for anybody, because I want to listen to a story or two. Hold on, guys. If you don't want to listen, you don't have to. Okay, camera a little. Be right back. I'm grabbing the book. Okay, I got it. I have it. Nicole, now I have 3 trinket boxes here. But this horse one is just out of this world. I love it. Putting a little lotion on my hands because I didn't think this was going to work. I thought I'm just going to try it before I go live to read one of these. And I know Carolyn's going to go live about another hour from now. Here we go, see? Dreadful Places. Like I said yesterday, this is a series on Prime Video. Were you here yesterday for it, Mary? Yeah, you were. Oh, yes. This is only like the second time I've worn it. I'll be taking it to Foley. I'll probably get kicked out, right? They'll be like, don't wear that. Don't advertise that place. Or Foley, we'll learn. We'll learn when we get there how you pronounce it, right? Oh, and I have another one too that my granddaughter Maddie got me. It's not here though, it's at her house. She bought it today. It's Victorian ghost stories. She loves the Victorian era. Okay, let's see here. Let's see what we're gonna look at the beginning. Let's see. We've got Cities of Shadow inside these walls, which we read Wuthering Heights. Distant shores, deep and dark, off the beaten path. Let's see. Let's go to Behind Closed Doors, because Wuthering Heights was really good, and that was advertised here on the page. The cover. And the next one says, and Behind Closed Doors, as well as Rare Material. This is from a podcast. And like I said, it says, watch the Amazon Prime exclusive series now. So, okay, let's go to Behind Closed Doors. It's supposed to be true, too, you know? Let's find it. Okay, there's Behind Closed Doors, and then there's another one behind the door. Let's go to Behind Closed Doors, page 58. It's in Cities of Shadows. Okay, you guys can still hear me, right? Okay, thanks, Mary. When Joseph Asch, A-S-C-H, opened his new Asch building in 1901, it was hailed as a modern marvel. It was a massive 10-story block of stone and iron, and it was said to be every bit as solid as it looked. But it was inside the building that the true breakthroughs could be found. It had freight elevators, wide open floors, and fire exits. In fact, Joseph Asch was so proud of his modern building that he called it fireproof, quote unquote. And a city in desperate need of more factory space for its massive garment making industry, it was perfect. So business partners Max Blanc and Isaac Harris signed a lease for the 8th floor. And business was good. Soon they expanded upward, taking over the top 3 stories of the building. Their shop, the Triangle Shirtwaist Company, became the premier manufacturer of the most popular type of shirt in the country, but they also became sloppy. On March 25th, 1911, a fire broke out in a pile of scrap cloth. The building might have been billed as fireproof, but inside it was overcrowded and full of flammable materials. Perfect conditions for a horrible tragedy. Less than an hour later, it was over. Some workers had burned to death. Others had fallen 10 stories to escape the flames. All told, 146 people had lost their lives. Today, the building is part of the New York University campus. Oh, wow, really? But its tragic past hasn't completely evaporated. For years, witnesses have reported the telltale scent of smoke throughout the halls. Others have heard voices. Sometimes it's just a faint whisper, while other times it's a frightening cry for help. Most people, though, just sense an overwhelming air of darkness, whether it's the tragic past of countless historic buildings or the personal darkness of the people who lived inside them. New York, it seems, is a city overpopulated by ghosts. And if you know where to look, the stories they tell will leave you feeling haunted. Overcrowded. New York City is a monster. There's no better way to say it. It's so large and unwieldy that it operates more like a country than a metropolis. Yes, it's beautiful. It's full of life and culture and a depth of social awareness that few other cities in the world can match. But it's also a beast. In a lot of ways, New York City is like an Olympic athlete, mortal like us, yes, but there's very little about it that we'd consider average. And it's old, too. Europeans have been in the area for over 400 years, a century and a half longer than America has been a country. It's played host to everything from rebellion and war to epidemics and terrorism. And all of that death and violence leaves a veneer of darkness on New York, like soot from a wildfire. The trouble with a city so large, though, is that it's easy to live inside it and be completely unaware of the stories you're standing on top of. Take Washington Square Park in Greenwich Village. It was established in 1827 as a public space, kicking off the construction of all the beautiful things you see there today. The arch, the fountain, all those amazing flowers and trees, and 20,000 dead bodies. That's because prior to being a public space, Washington Square was a potter's field, a graveyard for the poor and unidentified. Oh, who knew that? Then in the early 19th century, as yellow fever rolled across the city like a tidal wave, thousands of victims were added to the burial ground there. The graves are shallow, sometimes just a foot or two below the surface, and because of the sheer number of them all, they've never been removed. Just 3 blocks north of Washington Square Arch, there's an innocent-looking brownstone with a story of its own. You see, sometimes we bury the dead and they stay there in the ground below our feet. Other times, they refuse to go away, becoming dark roommates in an already overcrowded city. That was the experience of actress Jane Bryant Bartell, who moved into 14th West 10th Street way back in 1957. 57 wasn't so far back. I would have turned 2 that year. So buoy on you. We'll say, a little ways back in 1957. For 16 years, Juju bees were reading more. I wish I would have did my hair a little. It's so, yeah. Okay. For 16 years, Bartle lived in the building while suffering through what she claimed was intense paranormal activity. Shadows that moved, sounds that echoed from empty rooms, even objects that levitated. She claimed it was all a result of the dozens of deaths that had occurred in the building since the 1850s, and she wasn't alone in that theory. Oh, excuse me. Maybe Carolyn will show up. I bet she's doing her Peloton, or however you say it right now. I'll bet she is. Or she just finished. Thank you, Juju. Okay, let's see. Decades earlier in the 1930s, a woman and her mother both reported seeing a white-haired man in a white suit. He turned to the women and reportedly spoke to them. "My name is Clemens," he said, "and I has a problem here I gotta settle." And then he vanished. It turns out that the man looked a lot like Mark Twain, who had lived there for a year in 1901. Twain's real name, of course, was Samuel Clemens. Oh, wow, that's right. All of this was too much for Bartell, though, who committed suicide in 1973, just before publishing a book of her experiences there. Today, many New Yorkers refer to the old brownstone as the House of Death. But death happens all over the city. It always has. But more often than not, the reason is more human than supernatural. In fact, one of the first highly public murder trials in New York City happened way back in 1799, although it still haunts the area to this day. This was the year a 21-year-old woman named Elma Sands was killed and dumped into a well on Spring Street in Manhattan. Her killer, according to the prosecutor, was her wealthy fiancé, Levi Weeks. While much of the witness testimony and evidence pointed to Weeks as the true killer, his wealth brought a team of powerful attorneys to the courtroom: Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. Wow. Oh, and if any of that sounds even the least bit familiar, go ahead and assume you're the smartest in the room. Weeks got off the hook, but Elma Sands has apparently refused to slip away. The well was covered by a building in the 1820s, and for decades, the site played host to a restaurant. Reports of unusual activity in the building have been nonstop ever since, including plates and silverware that have been seen floating. Some have even claimed to see the ghost of Elma herself crawling out of the well, now located in the basement. There's also the small matter of the curse. According to the legend, as Burr and Hamilton were exiting the courtroom after their victory, Elma Sands' cousin, Catherine Ring, blocked their path and shouted a prediction to the room. "If you die a natural death," she cried, "I will think there is no justice in heaven." Then she pointed at Hamilton, who would be killed just 4 years later by Burr. But you don't have to take part in a murder trial to attract the attention of the dead. In fact, if you believe the stories, life is full of moments with the potential to leave us feeling haunted. And few locations in New York City can compare to one historic neighborhood near Prospect Park. But the story that lies dormant beneath the ground there is far worse than a shallow graveyard or body in the well. It's a tale of secret rooms, violent politics, and a love that refused to die. Hidden away. The area of Brooklyn, known today as, as Flatbush, began life as a Dutch colony in 1651. The, names, the name comes from the original appearance of the landscape, which was described as a flat, wooded plain. It's difficult to imagine, given the urban sprawl of modern New York, but for a while, Flatbush was a wide open collection of forests and farms. Roughly a century later, the city was under British rule, and that meant the old Dutch architecture was slowly giving way to English manners. And one of those newer homes was built in 1749 by an Englishman by the name of Lane. He came from a wealthy family that didn't care for his drunken parties and new lower class wife, and so New York became his home in exile. Life didn't change much for him in the colonies, though. The parties continued unchecked, and his grand manor, which he called Melrose Hall, became the centerpiece of local gossip. And then, some years later, he stepped outside during one of his celebrations and never returned. As far as I can tell, no one knows what happened to Mr. Lane after that. But Melrose Hall remained, and from the descriptions that survive, it was quite the home. It was 2.5 stories tall, with a gabled roof that created numerous small spaces, something Lane had apparently taken advantage of. The right side wing of the house held the dining room and library, while the left wing contained a large banquet hall, but it wasn't this collection of traditional rooms that gave the house its flavor. No, the true personality came from its hidden parts. According to one writer, in 1888, the fireplace in the banquet hall was flanked by 2 closets, and it was inside one of them that a secret door could be found. It only unlocked from the outside, but once unlocked, it revealed a narrow staircase that led to a hidden bedroom above the hall. Across the house in the dining room, another secret passage was hidden behind a piece of furniture. One writer claims that the whole thing swung outward like a door, and that walking through it would take you into the slave quarters. And as if that weren't enough, the home even had a small vaulted dungeon beneath the main house. At the same time, a few miles to the north in lower Manhattan, a man named William Axtell was growing restless. He was a merchant who'd spent most of his life in Jamaica as part of the business, but had moved to New York in the 1750s. But the city was expanding around him, and it was time to find more space and solitude. So when a home as textured and unique as Melrose Hall suddenly became available for purchase, Axtell didn't blink. But before he and his family arrived to move in, he sent someone ahead of them, his mistress, Isabel. Now, history is a bit foggy on who she really is. Some say she was his wife's sister, while others claim she was a woman he met in Jamaica. She was described as tall and dark, with long black hair and a kind, beautiful smile. And when she showed up at the house of Axtell and his wife, it was Miranda, one of the Axtell's most trusted slaves, who welcomed her inside and guided her to the secret bedroom above the banquet hall. Miranda would, in fact, become Isabel's lifeline. Since she couldn't open the door in the closet from her side, it was up to Miranda to bring her food and care for her needs. It was also a responsibility that Miranda kept entirely to herself at the request of William Axtell. Once the family had moved in, the lovers fell into a new clandestine routine. Once a week at midnight, William would creep downstairs to the banquet hall and sit by the fire. Then Miranda would appear and open the closet beside the fireplace, unlock the secret door, and release Isabel from her hidden chamber. Then the lovers would well, whatever lovers do. You get the idea. All of this went on for years. By day, Axtell ran his merchant business and worked for the English crown as a member of the governor's council. At night, though, he secretly met with his mistress. It wasn't honest, but you could certainly call him busy, I suppose. But life was about to change dramatically in Melrose Hall. Those midnight trysts would continue, of course, but daily life for William Axtell was about to slip into chaos and danger. You see, war had arrived, not in some far-off land or even a few miles away. No, when the Battle of Brooklyn took place on August 27th, 1776, it happened in the worst possible location, right in Axtell's backyard. All of this was bad news for William Axtell. He was an English loyalist who stood to lose everything, power, money, land, all of it, if the Americans managed to succeed. And in 1776, the Battle of Brooklyn showed just how close to home this new war for independence could get. As a member of the governor's council, he had a duty to perform. So it was common for rebel leaders to be captured and transferred to his personal dungeon below Melrose Hall. But it wasn't enough to hide them away from the watchful eye of the rebels. Axtell was being pushed toward action by the king. He was told to gather 500 men and get ready to march. It wasn't clear if he would be gone for weeks or months, but he would be out of the house and away from his lover, Isabel. And that's when a problem occurred to him. Miranda, the slave woman who cared for Isabel and kept their secrets from the rest of the household, was getting along in years. Hi, Julie W. Hope you liked the story. In fact, she was old enough that Axtell feared she might be close to death, which, as we all know, would be a very bad thing, because without Axtell around, Miranda was the only access that Isabel had to food and water. That secret door in the closet only opened from Miranda's side, and if she were to die, well, that hidden bedroom would slowly transform, first into a prison and then into a tomb. So the night before his departure, Axtell went to the banquet hall at their appointed time and waited for Miranda to open the door and lead Isabel to his side. When she arrived, he made his case. Leave, he told her, run away and find safety someplace else. He even handed her a bag of gold and told her to use it to take care of herself while he was gone. But Isabel didn't take the news well. She felt as though William was trying to abandon her, that he was essentially breaking up. Hi, Kathy in LA. Hope you enjoy the lore abandoned, dreadful places. I'm reading a chapter. Hope you like it. Let's see. He handed her a bag of gold, told her to use it to take care of herself while he was gone. She didn't take the news well. She felt that he was trying to abandon her and that he was essentially breaking up with her and using his impending military tour as an excuse. She screamed and threw the coins back at him and ranted about his motives. And then she ran back to the secret staircase inside the open closet, closed the door, and vanished from sight. They say that she was gone for a full year, far longer than he'd expected. In his absence, they say he was gone for a full year, far longer than he'd expected. In his absence, the very thing he had feared might happen did. Miranda, the only keeper of his secret, became sick and died. Legend says that on her deathbed, she tried to tell the others about Isabel, but everyone thought it was just the madness of a dying woman. Weeks later, William Axtell rode up the path to his beautiful estate and entered his home for the first time in a year. His wife welcomed him home. His adopted niece, Eliza Shipton, did the same. And then they led him into the banquet hall where a gathering of his friends waited for him. The moment he walked through the door, the party began. But it wasn't all laughter and joy. Axtell kept glancing at the closet door beside the fireplace. He longed to hold Isabel, to kiss her and hear her voice, but something was troubling him. He had seen no sign of Miranda since arriving. Let me get a sip here. Gotta get a sip. And I got my green tea that Nicole sent. Nicole, I like to put my seltzer water in it. Gives it a good flavor. Okay, let's see. The legend tells us that Axtell got up from his seat at one point in the night and ran across the house to the slave quarters. There he was greeted with the terrifying news that Miranda had passed away weeks before. And that's when panic fully gripped his heart. He staggered back into the banquet hall and wandered slowly through the gathering of people. They were laughing and singing and talking joyfully, but he couldn't hear their voices anymore. All he could think about was Isabel and the secret room that had become her prison. That's when the impossible happened. Every single candle in the room went out. At first, everything was dark, but then a subtle glow began to illuminate the edges of the room. One newspaper from 1886 described it as a quote-unquote sickly glowworm light. Then the sounds began. They were soft at first, low and distant, as if they were coming from a great distance. And then, just as they exploded in volume, the closet burst open and the secret door swung outward. That 1886 article described the woman who stepped out as ashen pale, each vein strongly defined on the emaciated features. Her long black hair hung drooping over her shoulders to the floor, and she seemed clad in airy gossamer. She didn't walk so much as glide, and she headed straight toward William Axtell. The room was silent. Every eye was on this strange new visitor. Maybe they were frightened. Perhaps they were waiting to see if this macabre performance would end in applause. Or maybe they were under some sort of spell. Whatever the reason, not a single sound could be heard as the pale shape came to a stop just inches from their host. The woman lifted her hand, a single finger extended, and aimed it at Axtell's face. And then she opened her mouth and uttered a single chilling word. "Betrayer," she said. And then the glow vanished, leaving all of them in pitch darkness. When candles were brought in and lit, the guests found no signs of the pale woman, but they did see something else. Axtell was sprawled out on the floor, eyes closed and body motionless. He was moved to his bedroom almost immediately, and a doctor was called to the house. But the legend tells us all that was all futile. Colonel William Axtell, they say, died that very night. Buried truth. In places as old and sprawling as New York City, history is bound to get buried beneath the bustle of everyday life. The tragedy of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire evolved into a watershed moment for labor reform and working conditions. The burial vaults in shallow graves of Washington Square Park have given way to beauty and art and culture, making the park a place that practically pulses with life. History slips away. It fades into the backs of our minds, much the same way it sinks beneath our feet. Humans are good at a lot of things, but forgetting is one of our crowning achievements. But there are always clues if you know where to look for them. Colonel William Axtell was a real person. In fact, if you visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art, you can see him. There's a painting of him hanging in Gallery 747. He commissioned it in the 1750s, just before moving into Melrose Hall, and it hung there for years. But as it turns out, William Axtell didn't die that night in the banquet hall of his home. The tides of war turned against the British, and by 1782, Axtell had packed up his family and returned to England. He died there in 1795, and there were no reports of ghosts at his deathbed. Yeah. Stories can be tricky, it seems. Sometimes they're rooted in fantasy, in events that never happened at all. Other times they sprout from truth, like a sapling sprouts from a seed, and take on a shape and life of their own. Stories grow, they evolve and shift with the passing of time. But the truth is always there, even if it's buried beneath centuries of hearsay. Melrose Hall passed from hand to hand over the years that followed. In a bit of irony, the first couple to take ownership after the Axtells left was their own adopted niece, Eliza Shipton, and her new husband, an American military officer named Aquila Giles. In 1880, the house was purchased by Dr. Homer Bartlett, and he felt it was time for some changes. An entire neighborhood had grown up around the property in the century since the Axtells' departure. So he had the main house lifted up and moved 400 feet farther back from the road. It was a change that came with casualties. All of the external buildings were demolished, and a number of ancient trees were cut down. The biggest loss of all, though, was the left wing of the house, which Bartlett decided was no longer necessary. But right before they moved it, Melrose Hall gave up one final secret. While searching the structure for valuables worth saving, someone discovered a secret chamber. After grabbing a light and venturing inside, they made a grisly discovery. It was a skeleton, many decades old and covered in dust. The skeleton, they say, was of a woman. The end. Wasn't too bad, right? Interesting. Hope you guys like it. Just a short little live. You know, I get in my reading moods. So sometimes I like to share it. Okay. I love you guys. Thanks for coming. See you at Carolyn's. Bye. I look like a bee right now. I look like an owl. Ugh. See you guys. Thank you.